Hello, we're going to do a run of videos to talk about why we do what we do, how we began, why we're called Plankbridge, and design and craft and all that kind of thing. I think you'll find this interesting. Why are we called Plankbridge? Where did the name come from? There was a famous artist, cartoonist, Norman Thelwell, who he's particularly famous for doing cartoons of children on horses and that kind of thing. But there was much more to him than that. He was a very, very accomplished artist. He wrote 3 books, and when I was a teenager, the first one I read was A Millstone Round My Neck, which was a autobiography about him buying an old mill, an old water mill in Devon or Cornwall. And I found that really inspiring. And he would illustrate it, and it's all full of lovely drawings and paintings. Another one that he wrote was Wrestling with My Pencil, which was all about him becoming an artist and training to be an art teacher. The third one that I read was A Plankbridge by a Pool, and I have a copy of it here. This is a more recent edition, but my copy at home is maybe even the first edition, I'm not sure. So I was really inspired by A Plankbridge by a Pool. It resonated with me and it meant a lot to me. I even wrote to Thelwell. I was about 15 or 16. It was to do with an art project, and I wrote to him to inquire about the watercolours that he did and how he picked out the more vibrant colours, which turned out to be gouache. And I used to love writing to authors, and so I'd read a book and I'd write and tell them what I thought of the book. It was fascinating. To get a reply from them, you get an envelope, a handwritten envelope with a stamp on the corner. I remember writing to a fantasy author in America, and I wrote and told him that I really liked the book covers, and it was a writer called David Eddings. I wrote to him, and I remember the thrill of the moment when the post would come, and a poster tube arrived, and it had American stamps on it, and I opened this poster tube, and there was a handwritten note from David Eddings to say, "Glad you like the covers. Here's some posters," and he'd sent me the full, all the editions, all the front covers of these books in poster form. I just loved it. Loved that thrill of all of that. So I wrote to Thelwell, and I've got in my copy of A Plankbridge by a Pool, I've got a handwritten letter from him. There's a whole load of magic around that I love. In the year 2000, I was sitting in my armchair at home by the wood burner, and it was one winter's evening, and I was sketching ideas around what are we going to be called? What is a really good trading name for our business? I remember my mother saying, "Keep it simple. Don't try and be too clever. Just be called Richard Lee Furniture," she said. Whilst I didn't want to be called Richard Lee Furniture, I always remembered her saying that. And if you're going to think of a name, keep it simple, don't try and be too clever. So I was sitting there sketching ideas, and my copy of A Plankbridge by a Pool was next to me, and I was thinking, Plankbridge, that's simple, that's not trying to be too clever. The very nature of a plank bridge is to be a simple way to get from A to B. You're not trying to be too clever. So I started sketching out the word plank bridge, doing it as 2 words, 1 word, doing it as if it's reflected in the water. So it was a sort of eureka moment, really. It was like, that's it, I want to be called Plankbridge. And we went on to register it as a trademark. It kind of encompasses everything that I stand for. It's the watery environment. It's about the nature reserve. We live on an old watercress bed, watercress farm that has since become a small, 5-acre natural wet meadow nature reserve. It's got a chalk stream running through the middle. A plank bridge by a pool is about Norman Thelwell buying a property on the River Test in Hampshire, and River Test is a world famous chalk stream, beautiful, and it really struck a chord with me. It was like, oh, wouldn't that be amazing to live somewhere like that? And as I was sitting in my armchair that evening sketching, that's, you know, it is a, you know, it's a tributary of the River Piddle. It's not the River Test, but it's our own little bit of nature reserve. The book covers him taking away that plank bridge and building a stone arch bridge, and, you know, all the sort of comic antics with his friends as they dug lakes and created a very, very beautiful place. A few years ago, we got asked, somebody approached us and said, we want a hut with double doors, we want to put it by a lake. So they came over to see us, and we did our normal chat, and I started sketching a design of a double-doored hut, which in those days we called a riverkeeper's hut. And as we were chatting, and they said, we live on the River Test in Hampshire, it's a rather lovely place, and we want to put it by a lake to create a view. And I said, so where is this on the River Test? Whereabouts are you? And it soon became clear that they lived in Norman Thelwell's house with a lake, and just amazing. So I told them the story of why we're called Plankbridge, and they loved it. So we set off, my brother and I, with the hut on the trailer, and I was slightly, with some trepidation, thinking, you know, is it going to live up to my expectations or not? When we got there, we went through the gates that were familiar from the book, and I was thinking, oh God, this really is it. We're at Thelwell's house. The lovely couple that had bought it, they're property developers, so the house didn't look like it did originally. It's radically changed. Admittedly, smaller. All these things are always smaller. It wasn't as big as I thought it would be. And I suppose when a book is written about a place, it's bigger than or it reads, and the perception is bigger than it actually might be. But it was all there, and we drove around. We took the hut around the far lake and came back up, and it turned out that they wanted to put the hut by the stone bridge that replaced the plank bridge, which meant so much to me. So we put the hut in position, and it had double doors. They wanted the view from the hut to be out through the double doors, looking across the lake to the island that had the duck house that featured in the book. But he wanted the perfect view of the island. It was their idea to bring the two armchairs that they were going to put at the back of the hut, and they would sit in the hut with their low table in between the two armchairs, and we put a winch cable on one of the wheels of the hut. They sat in their armchairs, and we started to winch, and as the hut turned round more and more, only slightly, but as it turned, he shouted, "Whoa, stop there!" And we had framed the view through the double doors, so that when he sits in the evening in his armchair with his gin and tonic on the table, and his wife watching the sun go down, the view through the double doors was across the stone bridge where the plank bridge used to be, with the island in the distance and the duck house. Those magic moments don't happen very often, but it did then. We're going to talk about other things in future videos. We're going to talk about craft and turning a plank of sawn timber into a oak door. How do we do that? I think you'll find that interesting too. So, until the next time, bye.